Hello, my English learning friends. I want to talk to you about the Cambridge writing exam, and in particular part 2 of the writing exam. Because there's a technique and an approach to this that I have found lots of students are just not doing, and I really think everyone should do. So this task is kind of a creative writing task, essentially, and that's because more often than not there's some creative element to it. There's some unreal scenario that you have to write about. Like, you have to imagine that your friend is in a particular situation and you're writing a letter to them, etc. And there is the key word right there: imagine. And that's basically the trick, that's basically the hack, is to imagine first, to lead with your imagination. And I've found that students really don't do this, or don't do this in the right way. What you need to do is first imagine the scenario, and imagine it well, imagine it thoroughly. So have a rich and detailed and fleshed out scenario, universe in which this letter or this proposal or whatever it may be is being written. And then write as if you are in that universe, as if you are in that scenario. And that informs the letter in such a way that it's rich in interesting content, it's realistic, it's well organized, and it flows easy when you write it as well. So it's such a hack and it's such a boost. And the best way of doing this is to draw inspiration from the real world, from your real memories, from real people that you know, from real places that you've been to, and use reality as much as possible, and then imagine some variation of reality which fits to the scenario you're given. So that's the mental practice for fleshing out that rich imagination before you write. So let's have a quick look at the mark scheme for this writing task and break down why and how this is going to help you in every single marking criterion. So first off, content. So content will be way easier to find because good content is the content that makes the examiner go like this. Ah, you know, that's really good content. When the examiner says, ah, yeah, I like it, you see. And to get to that level of good content, you need to be inventive, you need to be imaginative, you see. And also, when you're imagining something, you have this way of detecting good content, because when you're imagining something, you can kind of feel which parts are especially interesting, which parts are especially exciting, because they give you that emotional spike and they get you excited when you're imagining them. So you unlock this way of detecting what would make really good content. And of course, also because there are so many rich details, you have this massive tapestry to choose from as well, content-wise. So this last point also is relevant for language marks. So if you have a large pool of information which you can write about and keep things coherent, then you can cherry pick for good structures and good language from that cohesive whole, and you can cherry pick for good structures and language safely. One of the biggest traps people fall into time and time again in speaking and in writing is seeing a topic, deciding, okay, I've got a handful of nice structures and nice words that relate to this topic, so I'm going to put those in and make the rest of my text conform to those words, those structures. In fact, I'm going to make the rest of the information, the rest of the history, the story, the scenario, conform to the information that I need to be true to put in those structures. And they do it this way. When they do it this way, they tie themselves into horrible knots, and they are trying to solve this Rubik's Cube to make it make sense while still having those structures and those words that they absolutely must have inside the text. So that's really not good, and what they end up doing to themselves then is they write something that's badly organized and has no good content, that has lots of irrelevant content, and it's all kinds of ways of shooting themselves in the foot by doing that. But if you have this large, cohesive, imagined scenario, you have a huge pool of details, a huge pool of information, which is all works together well because it's part of this cohesive whole, and then you can cherry pick from that. You can cherry pick which details of this scenario do I choose to write about because I know an advanced word there, or because I can use an advanced structure to get this across. So you can cherry pick for good language safely when you do it this way. Organization. Now, this one is like magic. If you really imagine that you're writing to someone, if you really imagine who your audience is and what your purpose is for communicating something to that audience, that will just orient you for your organization so well. Because when you imagine the receiver of that information and how they are assimilating your information, that immediately triggers you to start thinking, what do they need to hear first? What do they need to hear next? And so on. And it's a bit like when you spend 7 hours writing or trying to write an essay and getting nowhere with it. And then when you're taking a break and you're chilling with one of your friends and they turn to you and say, what's your essay about? And you start telling them what your essay is about. And then suddenly, as you're saying this to that person, you realize that you are reciting off the top of your head a well-structured, well-detailed essay, which with a little bit of editing could be submitted. And you've just done it off the top of your head in 2 minutes when you were struggling for 7 hours before. Well, it's that person in front of you. It's that person in front of you, and it's that feeling, the receiver of your information, that unlocks that ability to organize, to structure, and for everything to flow. And you approximate this when you have that rich imagination and have a really real imagination of who you're writing to. So lead with your imagination and draw inspiration from the real world. See you later.